ready to take on the day. Activated Mornings on WEFM 99.9 is on now.
Welcome back, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is now 8:10, and with us in studio is Ari, myself, of course, Roleza, and we have joining us Kenton Chance. Well, before we get into our discussion this morning, just like to announce that Sachiko wishes to advise their valued clients at the general public, that their offices will close at 12 noon on Thursday, February 8th, 2024, to facilitate a team meeting. Additionally, all cashiers will close at 11 a.m. Regular business hours will resume on Friday, February 9th, 2024. Sachiko apologizes for any inconvenience caused. Now, before I wanted to get the topic out of the way quickly and not waste time given the constraint that was placed just now with the last segments. I didn't get to ask Roleza, how are you? How has your morning been going, Roleza?
I'm good.
All right. Good morning, Kenton. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Ari, and good morning to your listeners. Good morning, Roleza.
Bonjour, ça va?
Bonjour, ça va bien?
Ça va
Et
bien?
vous?
Ça va bien aussi?
All right. So you guys got that out, your sister.
You can contribute, not true?
Well, I could contribute
It's
in another way.
Spanish.
You know? I could contribute in
No, y'all don't start. No, there'll be a monopoly in here. Don't start.
All right. So Kenton, what we want to discuss this morning is, do you think that journalism is under attack, or at least the state of journalism in how we disseminate information currently, on the restrictions that we face, and what can be done to prevent stuff like this from happening in the future?
Well, the thing is, it seems as every time I'm invited to a radio program is to talk about journalism.
What would you like for us to talk about, Kenton?
You're the one choosing the topic. It's your show. I happen to feel that journalism, when practiced as journalism should be practiced, is always under some form of attack, because journalism generally brings to the fore things that a lot of people, often very powerful people, would prefer to be hidden. So I think journalism is generally under attack. Sometimes more explicitly than others, sometimes in some very subtle ways. But, there's a lot of maybe threats or potential threats to journalism as it should be practiced.
You remember when David Ames was brought before the High Court? And I remember you and I covered that. And that was a very interesting case to me, and it always stuck with me over the years that Ames was brought for, what was it, mishandling funds?
I think that the one at the criminal court.
The criminal court.
Yeah, it was for stealing government money, stealing the money that he had withdrawn from the salaries of people for NIS and taxes and what have you.
And I remember when the UK judges and lawyers came at the High Court, what was that charge?
That was a civil matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember that was a very strange case to me, because, as you know, in the High Court there's a media box, but we were told that no journalists are allowed in the media box that day. So we were in the regular gallery, and then they said to us, I can't remember what exactly was said, but I remember they were speaking in soft tones, so we could have barely heard and able to record what was happening.
I remember I asked somebody about that, and they were saying that that was probably more of a cultural thing, where British lawyers have a tendency to speak a lot softer than Caribbean lawyers would. I don't know if that
I don't think so. Because if you remember in the case, they were reading out emails between Ames and government officials, and they pointed out some very unethical behavior from both Ames and government officials.
Yeah, I do remember, and a lot of it was very difficult to hear what was being said, but maybe it's just a function of a 200-year-old building. I don't know.
But maybe the new building will have those problems.
Well, there was a new court that was opened recently upstairs Marco Plaza. I mean, the space was custom designed for a court, and I was in there up to yesterday, and the acoustics in there is still poor. They only have one monitor across from the jurors. It's probably like a 40-inch monitor. And I'm thinking, I keep making this point. This is the year 2024 when monitors are so cheap. Everybody buys a 60, 70-inch monitor, and you can't get a few decent monitors in a courtroom, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not. You see, in St. Vincent, we have a tendency to slap on the name modern to everything, and you go in there and you say, well, you know, this building would not be out of place 200 years ago, but you just put it's built contemporarily. And he put on the name modern on there. A classic example is the court building in Caliacor. That town hall building was built maybe 5-6 years ago, certainly less than a decade ago. And the courtroom was custom built. And you go in there, there's no audio system in there. There's no audiovisual system, no projectors. The AC hasn't been working for like 3 years. And I'm asking myself, I mean, how long does it take to fix or to replace a few AC units? Certainly the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines or the Calico Town Council, whoever is responsible for that building, can afford to repair or buy 4 AC units. It's just absolutely ludicrous. The same thing at the Georgetown Court, where you don't even want to think about Mespo and Bayabu. I went to the Mespo Court once, and a guy who lived next door, he said, look, they came and borrow my fan here sometime, but they never returned it. Anyways, but we're not talking about buildings. We're talking about journalism.
Was the pastor that boy?
The Morgans. Yeah.
That's the last time I went to Mespo Court. But my other question is, and you remember, because I've said it on air that we've covered a number of things together and events, together, and we have attended a workshop in Barbados a few years ago where the question of citizen journalism came up and whether or not we as journalists should acknowledge citizen journalists. Now, it's unavoidable that in this current era that everyone will be taking out their cell phones or noting things or sharing their thoughts when they witness stuff on social media. But how is that different from actual journalism, and does that contribute to misinformation?
If I'm somewhere and I see something and I record it, okay, let me put it this way. If I'm somewhere and somebody gets in an accident, or if I'm at home and somebody gets a cut and I go for a first aid kit and administer a bandage, does that make me a doctor?
Okay.
Or does it make me a nurse? People, and I always encourage people when they see something happening and they think it could be of interest, once it doesn't put themselves in danger, to record it. You know, what the question is, after you record that thing, what do you do with it? I always add that caveat. It's not everything that you record that you would publish, all right? But there's no harm in recording something. And also remember, you don't put yourself in danger to record something. So I am not dismissing the value of a citizen recording something. But because I record something, it doesn't make me a journalist. Journalism goes beyond that. It has to do with the verification of information and putting things into context. And that is something that I personally think is seriously lacking in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, even among established media entities. You're reading a story and you ask, well, what is the context of this story? There's no background. There's none of that. So to just take something and throw it online. You know, I woke up a few weeks ago to a message on Facebook. Somebody sends me a picture of a guy lying on the ground, and they say something like, "Oh, post that" or something like that. So I said, "Well, what is happening here?" You know, up to now, the person has not responded.
All right, so define what makes who makes a journalist a journalist. Let's start there.
A journalist is someone who goes to collect, verify. Verifying the information is very important. It also involves editing the information and presenting the information in a particular format. So sometimes you might hear people saying, you might read a story and say, well, what is that? That is not a news story. And somebody will say, well, that is the person's style. So people have styles of writing, but journalism has a format. So for instance, if we're talking about the inverted pyramid, it's where the most important part, the most interesting bit goes to the top. And then you read, I have a tendency to write very long and detailed stories. And I tell people, if somebody puts a plate of food in front of you, you eat how much you want and you leave the rest. Different
But
people.
I would not necessarily agree with that, because if you, in the case of a written article, if you don't read the full thing, then you're going to be missing out maybe some of the salient things to help to tie your story together.
Yeah, that is true. But it's not every time we pick up a book either, we finish it. It's not every movie that we finish.
But then can you speak with authority on something if you haven't read it in full detail?
Well, you could get the like I said, if you're writing in the inverted pyramid, which I almost always write my news stories in the first few paragraphs, you would get the essence of what the story is. Whether or not you want the details, that is up to you. And I write for the person who I've written 5,000 word court stories before. I met one guy say, man, I sit down and I read that thing in one go. And this is a person without a legal mind, who's not a lawyer or anything like that. So I was making the point that you have styles, but you also have format, and that is generally the format in which hard news is written. So you might almost always hear a hard news story about the Prime Minister begin by saying, or Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves has said, or the leader of the opposition has said, because that is just the format for hard news stories. So, there's style and there's format. I see, and by the way, I don't believe that somebody has to be university trained.
I was just
to
going
be
to
a
ask
journalist.
you that.
I tell people all the time, I did not become a journalist by going to Taiwan to learn journalism.
Same
I
here.
learned journalism from a man called Charles Harding. I didn't learn journalism in Taiwan. When I was in Taiwan, you could have sent me to cover any stories. I learned a lot about the theory of journalism and the theory of communications. And that's why a lot of my stories tend to have the impact that other people's stories might not necessarily have. So this is not to say by any stretch of the imagination that you have to go to university to become a journalist. In fact, a lot of the great journalists have never gone to university to learn journalism. But it is important that you learn journalism from somebody who knows what journalism is.
No.
And then how do you find somebody who knows what journalism is if it's not necessarily a university degree or whatever? Is it somebody based on years of experience? Because let's say you may prefer somebody's particular style of writing. Do you take your training from that person as opposed to who? How do you define who you're going to learn best from?
But remember, I said it's not about style, it's about form. So within that form, you have a lot of different styles. I think the question I would ask, if somebody wanted to learn journalism, and they say, well, what I would say, ask, well, where did this person learn journalism? Because before journalism became got to the point where there were actually degrees and programs in journalism, people just attach themselves as they would with any apprentice position to somebody and learn journalism from them. I have a book called News Writing and Reporting, and when you see how journalism developed, journalism used to be like a short story that you would read in a novel, and you won't get the crux of it until you got to the end. But that's when people had time to kick back on their patios and read a long story, and but as the profession evolved, as the craft and the art evolved, then the inverted pyramid pretty much became the standard. Sometimes people refer to bullet points. Some publications don't like bullet points, others do. So I guess each person for him or herself has to decide whether the value that they place on somebody's journalism or somebody's skill as a journalist, and determine whether or not he or she wants to learn the craft from that person.
But Kenton is the same. Hey, I didn't become a journalist in Taiwan. I became a journalist. Hey,
And you were working in journalism and for
exactly.
for years.
I read that same book, the news reporting and writing. I shadowed you. I shadowed Life Compton. I shadowed Claire Kisa. And I picked up stuff on the way. I researched stuff myself. We know, historically speaking, that information usually used to be handed down in whatever your tribe is, whatever your background is, whatever, whether you're Aboriginal, whether you're Viking, wherever you came from. It was a custom that someone in that village would hand down the stories to another person in order to keep your history alive. And that's what journalism is, detailing what is happening. Because right now, as we're sitting here, we're making history.
And that's why they say journalism is the first draft of history. A lot of times when you want to find out what happened, like for instance, if most people want to find out what happened in the 1979 eruption of La Soufrière, they would immediately go to the archives and pull up the Vincentian newspaper and read what is going on there.
Yes.
And that's why documenting things are so important. And you document things as a journalist, regardless of how you feel about them personally. So once something meets the standard of journalism, you have to remember that this is also part of our responsibility to document what is going on and to publish it.
No, I'm glad that you raised that, right? On, I think it's the weekend or last week, One News SVG posted a story about someone who proposed to their girlfriend after the girlfriend stuck with them during, I think they had some sort of illness or something like that. And somebody on my Instagram posted, how is this a news story? And I had to break down to them different kinds of news story. And this in itself is a human interest story. This is a story that person could be emotionally tied to and relate to this sort of story. It's not just hard. It's not just murders. It's not just opening a prize giving something that makes news. It's whatever is socially or culturally relevant
And interesting
to people.
So it's not just merely the event, but how the event is presented. You know,
exactly.
Some of the stories that people cuss the most about, this is not news.
But yeah, they read it, huh?
That's the one they read the most.
But yeah, they read it.
And the fact that they're so interested in it is what makes it news. It's what people are interested in. Once I saw a very respectable, it's a media agency. They wrote a story, and I forgot what you call that. It's not really the headline, but what you tell your subscribers what the story is about. They put in their rumor. A rumor actually became news. And the reason why the rumor became news is because of the nature of the rumor, why it, became news. And if you read publications like AP has a section called like the odds and what have you, and some very, very interesting stories that most often, it doesn't change anything. But it just, it's entertaining, and it might be uplifting, or you might say, oh wow, that's really curious. So,
and for context, AP is Associated Press.
And, yes. Oh, that's very good of you too.
Back to the inverted pyramid. We're trained, right, that in the first at least two paragraphs, and two paragraphs is a stretch, you're supposed to know what is happening in the story, the minor details. Like, okay, and this person said, or that person said, isn't as important as the beginning. And someone asks, do we need to know what the prime minister is doing or where he is going? And I said, the leader of a country is, whatever he does is always news.
Yes,
always. If the prime minister could trip and fall down, that is news.
Well, if the prime minister trips and fall, that is definitely news.
I
would take a shade with it. I won't say he's always news, but the things that he does that are of consequence. Like, for instance, we're trained as journalists that dog bites man is not news because, it's not abnormal for dog to bite man. But I will tell you, if the prime minister's dog bites somebody, it is definitely news because it's not just a dog biting a man, but whose dog it is or what kind of dog it is. And
you went vintage the boy. I ain't hear that in years. Dog bites man is not news, but I ain't hear that one in years.
I mean, I think it's the most basic and relatable. People, it's there's nothing abnormal about dogs biting people, but it would be a curious thing if somebody were to hold on to a dog and bite it.
But just like to remind everyone, it's an interactive program. The number to call is 457-9997. Also, the number to WhatsApp is 457-9997. We're live on YouTube and Instagram at WEFM99SVG. Right now, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back to answer questions or comments that persons have left on the WhatsApp and the live.
Sparrows, rum of pure sophistication. Sparrows, rum, aged to perfection. Skillfully crafted and forged with time in no barrels. A rum so divine. Discover authentic Caribbean rum. Sparrows, premium rum. Sparrows, full-bodied rum. Sparrows, pure sophistication. Discover authentic Vincentian rum. Sparrows, premium rum.
Distilled and blended by St. Vincent Distillers Limited. Please drink responsibly.
Agents, Careers, Distributions Limited.
Do you want to feel clean or refreshed after using the bathroom? Whether at home, work, or play? Welcome to My Smart Toilet Seat. All of our products wash your private parts after using the bathroom without the use of your hands. Let's hear what our national table tennis champion, Damian Dublin, has to say.
I tried it and it works. There are 4 options. Simply add an attachment to your existing toilet seat, or choose a non-electric seat, or better, an electric seat that washes and dries you with warm water and air. Lastly, get a complete smart toilet that also flushes itself. What are you waiting for? Get your smart toilet seat today. Be smart, be refreshed, be clean, be a winner like me.
Our smart toilet seat is available throughout St. Vincent at retail outlets with the orange flags. You can call us at 457-1703 or visit our website at justwashit.vc.
It all started with a penny. For over 85 years, we have invested in our farmers, fishermen, people, and our country. When we were called to serve, we were here. We understand what is valuable to our people and our country. That is why we support all industries, including tourism. We are the bridge towards a brighter future and economic growth. When our people, government, and businesses called upon us, we were here. 85 years later, First National Bank St. Lucia Limited is here for you.
WEFM, the new fresh sound.
Rise and shine. Let's get ready to take on the day. Activated Mornings on WEFM 99.9 is on now.
And the time is 8:33, and we're back this morning with Activated Mornings. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Ari, and with me in studio is Roleza and Kenton Chance, and we're talking, is journalism under attack, or what constitutes the journalism? And we have a few questions here that Roleza would read.
All right, so we have a question here, a question to both of you as journalists. Do you believe that the news and reporting have become a promotional employee exercise for interested parties? That is, an unwilling employee promoting an unknown agenda of interest groups.
Talk about questions you'd rather see than hear. Well, the thing is, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I've seen some curious evolution. I won't say into journalism, but into quote unquote news production, where people have moved from one stage to the other, and then you look at the finished product and you wonder, well, you know, what in God's holy creation is going on here? But because of the nature of the media, and especially social media, people could just, people could in essence become whoever they want to be. And the thing is that the news, like anything else in a free market, the market would decide, and people would really decide and make their own judgments about who you are and the quality of your production.
All right, so I think somebody's here. All right, so I'm just going to read it as I say, right? Osei John is a better journalist than you.
I'd be happy to hear that. One would
Okay.
always want to hear that those who are coming behind are better than they have been.
Okay, I think the person said this. They actually started it off with saying they're trying to mess with you. So
Yeah.
he said that you would get it.
Yeah, I did get it.
All right.
Osei John Jr. is my nephew. I did a video
Oh,
of him.
him. All
Yeah,
right. Oh,
yeah.
yes, he is a better journalist. Yes, yes, yes. I totally agree with you, listener. Yes, I remember that. Yes, that had me smiling from beginning to end. All right. Kenton, I do have a question for you, right? There are a few persons in SVG who are generally on the minds of persons and who are topical for many persons, right? You happen to be one of those, maybe the top three.
Me. Wow.
Right? Because I know that you are probably one of the few journalists who I can say you would ask your questions, right? You don't tend to hold back. You're doing what you're supposed to do, right? But there's another thing that persons tend to have commented on in the past in terms of your headlines being clickbait. Talk about that for me, please.
Look, when I returned to St. Vincent in 2012, I thought that one of my greatest weaknesses as a journalist was headline writing. You know who I thought was really good at writing headlines?
News.
Jude at the Searchlight.
Oh, okay.
I used to think so. Well, I'm not saying that I don't think so anymore, but he's one of the persons who I thought was very good at writing headlines. And maybe he is very good at writing newspaper headlines. But you see, the thing is that when I was doing my internet journalism, I was told that the headline is in essence the story. People talk about the headline is a clickbait. What is a clickbait? A clickbait is when you click on something and the content that is there is not what it pretends to be. Is there ever a case where somebody can read a story that Kenton Chance wrote and say, oh, but this headline has absolutely nothing to do with this story? I don't think so. And I really don't think so. I'm not even going to add a caveat that if it happens, that is few. But my headlines are always based on the content of my stories.
Same here.
What it is, I would say to that, Kenton, right? Clickbait or not, the point is you've clicked on it. And what it is that I tend to find people doing is that they take the headline alone and run with it, thinking that the headline alone is the full essence of the story. And for me, what it is that really and truly annoys me many times that persons don't continue to read the story. So therefore, if you don't read the story, you won't understand the essence of what the headline was speaking about. So I think that part is very important. You cannot just take the headline and run with it and assume that is all to this story.
It's interesting to hear that point of view because someone here at WEFM had a problem with a headline that I made to put on one of the lives, and they were saying it gives off clickbait. But I do believe that the story was there. What was in the headline was what we discussed.
But wait, let me ask you something. If you're having a show, you want people to listen to it, right?
And
if you write a book, you want people to read it.
What is your title? What is your headline?
That's the point.
It's what draws in your audience.
I went to a bookstore in London. In the airport in London, and there are hundreds of books there. I picked up one called Prisoners of Geography. There's something that, excuse me, the name and the outline of the book. The content lived up to but the writer could have given that book any other name and it might not have had the same effect. So don't say something is a clickbait because it causes you to click on the story. Something becomes a clickbait when you click on it, the content is not related to the story. You know, one of the first persons who acknowledged this publicly was Kent Thomas, who studied in Taiwan.
Mr. Farine?
Yes. He said, I have a tendency to write in a circular manner where I would begin the story, go through all the details and bring it back to the top. And like you said, you can't just read a part of this story and then say, "Oh, how you say this and that? I see that," and then you're gone. You know, if you want to make that kind of critical analysis of something, you have to read it through to the end.
All right. So another question here, Kenton. Can you give an example of a story you wrote about that has significant impact or received a lot of attention, and how do you identify your potential sources?
That's more than one question.
All right, so let me break it. You
Well,
got the two
before
parts.
before Roleza breaks it down, I forgot to mention to the listeners that Mr. Chance would only be here until 8:45. Or I think you said you might
I can stretch it to 8:50 because I have
Yeah.
to go to court
Yes.
this morning.
All right.
All right, so first part. Can you give us an example of a story you wrote about that has a significant impact or received a lot of attention?
Well, there's a lot of stories that receive a lot of attention. In terms of the impact, I mean, I don't really measure impact. I look at my job as a journalist as purely journalistic. I see it as my role to, put information out there. And, for instance, there was a case where somebody was living in a particular circumstance, and I got wind of it, and I was gonna go and write about the story. Somebody else who was involved in the story apparently heard about it, who was involved in the media, sorry, and they called a politician. I mean, my job is not necessarily to call politicians. My job is to write news. I mean, yes, there are times that I've called politicians on behalf of people. Sometimes people just don't know what to do. And, if I go to an accident scene, one of the first things I do, people might not notice, is that I ask, has the police and the ambulance, have they been notified? And people would say, yes, but because I know about this thing called the bystander effect, where everybody would think that somebody else has done it.
Yeah.
I almost always call, especially if it's a serious incident, call the notify police before I record anything. So in terms of impact, I'm not too sure. The public would have to judge that. There was another part of the question.
I could probably, let me ask you this question, because I know that when the story was written and when there was a follow-up, there was a little bit of, I guess, criticism of your story, right? This one involved the children in Beckway. I think you had termed the title of it feral children.
No, I didn't use that term though.
So why did that stay in my head then?
I don't know.
All right, okay, children. So go ahead. Okay, but
that really doesn't sound like me at all. Feral children.
You remember the story that I'm talking about?
I definitely remember this story.
Right.
But what was the criticism of the story?
No, in terms of the follow-up in that, I guess the use of the word feral was a little bit harsh.
No, that wasn't that wasn't me. I didn't use that word. I don't think so at all.
All right, okay, so go ahead and.
But that's the story. The children live in a tent.
Right.
I wasn't even the person who.
There's a sidebar to that.
No, I'm thinking. I know if that term was actually used. I'm thinking I know who probably might have used it.
I know who used it. I remember this story.
Okay. That's why I looked at Ari like that. I mean, I studied sociology. I would never refer to people as feral people. I mean, I don't think I won't be so crass. But in fact, my story was even among the first. In fact, the family gave me a full-length interview. And I can call his name because he's one of my mentors, Dexter Rose. I remember Dexter Rose commending me for the way I conducted that interview, because he said, I just asked questions and listened. And what I can tell you is that family, a few years ago, that family contacted me to say, this is what the children are doing now. I mean, it was for my own private information. Right. We are in the United States. This is what we're doing. And the family, to a large extent, just felt that the state just disrupted their lives. People decide to live, in St. Vincent, pardon this word, we tend to be so parochial that we can't understand that there are people who just decide to live differently from us. And the people, when the children were examined, health-wise, they were healthy. In terms of their education, they were educated at their level and beyond. People felt that the people living in those circumstances against them, well, we never got any sense that was the case.
So, I have a question, right? Because you've called into WEFM a number of times and I wasn't able to ask this question. And I've seen you make some posts on your private page about an incident that may or may not have happened between yourself and the current press secretary. What is it that happened there?
Who's Cian Marshall?
Oh, Cian Marshall is in the current press secretary, the person who's in charge of the journalists at the Argyle International Airport during the
you mean the press officer?
Sorry, press officer.
What do you mean? What happened there and where?
Well, I saw that there was a bit of a back and forth. What exactly caused that?
I don't want to sound like a lawyer, but what back and forth exactly?
Okay, I can't just bring up what is it that you posted on
Look,
Facebook.
I always tell people, you see how you and I are talking across microphones?
Yes.
Candyman and I, we were on Extreme FM across the microphone a couple times. I have nothing against the gentleman, absolutely nothing whatsoever. And even with that, I am not the kind of person to carry around bad blood. It's just not in my nature. I just happen to believe that he was given an assignment and he did not handle it as well as he could have. But I also have confidence in him that he might have learned some lessons from that. I mean, I have a tendency, a lot of people know me as a very serious person, but I could be a very whimsical and, jokey, if I have to say, insinuating person. I mean, sometimes I take it a little too far. My wife tells me so. As one,
yes, your Christmas the Christmas pajama thing. Yes, that was like, what? This is kind of time?
Yeah, that's just mocking people, of course. But yeah, I don't have personal. I try not to have personal beef against people.
I didn't take it as personal, but I also share reservations about the way that he conducts himself as a professional, and in that specific instance, I do feel like the way it was handled was wrong.
I do feel so too. And the thing is that I always tell people, right? Like when Luther was appointed as Consul General to the US, right? I said publicly that I have every confidence that Luther will do the job that he's hired to do. I have every confidence that he will do the job. Note what I'm saying, that he is hired to do. And people often do the jobs that they are hired to do. Not the job that the public necessarily expect them to do, but the one that they are hired to do. And sometimes in doing that job, you forget the circumstances in which you're doing that job. And we just have to remember that in those positions, and especially when you are interacting with foreign international media, you have to be extremely careful. I mean, nobody hires a public relations personnel, or nobody should want to hire public relations personnel, where at the end of your event, all the focus is on the public relations officer for the wrong reasons. And nobody's talking about your event.
But that is also how we're trained, that you, as the reporter, you are not supposed to become the story.
Exactly.
You, the journalist in the situation, not supposed to become the story.
Yep.
You're hired to do a certain thing. And what I realized in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the minute somebody has a critique about you, that means that they have something personal against you. That don't have to mean that.
Look, people can have professional differences all of the time. Sometimes you have forums in which you can express them privately, and sometimes there are some things that just have to be dealt with publicly.
When the thing happened and I said what I said, I do think it was unprofessional and I do think it was embarrassing. Boston's asking me, what's your problem? Look, I do not know this man. I would see this man on the street and pass him straight. I do not know him. But what I have seen reflects my opinion of him. Same with Damien from One News with the situation. I don't know Damien, Matt. Bosses like, oh, you have a personal thing against. I do not know Damien. I have never come across Damien at press conferences. Nothing.
He used to be sitting at this.
I find that out after. I don't know the man.
But the thing is, I mean, I've been around long enough to know all of these people. Like I said, I've been on shows with Candyman. He invited me when he was at Extreme 2 mornings. I think we went in, and people thought that we had good chemistry, got along well, which I found was the case. And I mean, I haven't seen him in a while, but I really don't have anything personal against him. I mean, sometimes you are placed in a position for which you're not at the point prepared, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn on the job
and become capable.
Yeah, but you just have to, you have to manage yourself well. If you're placed in a position like that, and it becomes more about you than the position, and then when you are a spokesperson for somebody, I think I'm going to repeat myself. You really don't want the attention to come on you. A good friend of mine bought a book for me. I'm trying to remember the name now. Don't Blame the Dog. And essentially the story is you have guests coming over to a party, and you have an old dog, he's arthritic and he's trying to go to the bathroom. He doesn't make sense. He craps in the room. What do you do? Do you take some air freshener, spray there, and pray that the people don't hear? And this is a public relations professional who's writing this book. Or do you go to your guests and explain to them? So look, we have a situation. Can you please give me a few minutes and let me clean it up? And then, so if you take the first option, obviously at some point it is going to become public. So, if I were to do another degree, I would do a degree in something like crisis communications, to help people to manage crises, because some of us, we just can't manage crises. You're organizing something goes wrong and everybody starts flustering rather than, and a lot of these things we can avoid them with proper planning. There was once I had to come and host Voices here for Jomo Thomas. And this helped to inform my decision this morning. And I was trying to get somebody. At the last minute, the person said they couldn't come. What do I do? That was, in essence, a crisis. 2 hours before the show. I said, what can I do? And I thought, let me call Mr. Depesh and ask him if he can come. And he came in and we had a wonderful programs. It's all about planning and all of these things. So we need to move to the stage in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where a criticism of somebody's action doesn't become a personal attack on the person.
But that also depends on somebody's level of maturity as well. Are you willing to accept the criticism and move forward, learn from it, and adjust? But there are some persons who, to use one of the terms your friend tends to use a lot, hold it in the craw.
Well, yeah, and my crying, and when you have thing in the crying, it has a tendency to go sour and all. Look, a lot of people will think that I'm extremely critical of people publicly. That is not the case. Most people, and you have probably not noticed, but most feedback that I have to give to people, I give it to them privately. As it should be. And yes. once I am convinced that you would listen to me, you would give me an ear, I would, I went to an event. Our church was having an event. Well, an event was being held to benefit of our church Sunday. And I simply asked somebody a question. And you don't want to hear the response. And then that, evolved into having an attitude. And sometime later I asked somebody who was there, I said, did you find that I spoke to this person in any way, any untoward way? They said, I was totally shocked. And that's why, but we are too intolerant of a society, and people have an issue with somebody asking a question. You don't ask any questions. You don't question anything. And then, we really need to move.
The other thing is some persons are not receptive to learning, which is what generally is the problem, and then, yeah.
But I tell people, I make a living by putting people under the spotlight, writing about things that a lot of people would rather not come to public. And I know that people are going to put me under the spot.
But it's a conversation that you and I had personally.
All the time.
Because I have been in the news. You have been in the news. a lot of other people that we know have been in the news. But if it is that your job requires discussing or reporting, you cannot have an issue being placed
in the spotlight.
Yep. If you shine in the light, you can't be mad if the light shine back at you.
Exactly.
But it's 8:53 and you went over.
So as Kenton is saying, I just wanted to read this because I believe in people knowing how people feel about them while they're alive. So the person saying, one of the things that I respect and applaud Kenton for, especially his videos, he doesn't just do the story for ratings. He asks questions and he listens. All right. So that's
I try.
That's one of the positive things.
Thank you for that. But unfortunately, I have to run. So, folks, it was nice being here, and do have a pleasant day.
You also.
We're going to break quickly, and we'll be back to quickly discuss the census.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's a whole new world out there. Reaching new customers and getting products faster. That's what it's all about. Ocean freight rates are skyrocketing, so don't pay more for slower service. It's time to switch to faster, more reliable air cargo service with SkyMax Cargo. Up to 3 flights weekly to and from the USA, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbean islands. Providing excellent import, export, and e-commerce solutions to put you ahead of the
the competition. For special low rates on small packages and air cargo, contact SkyMax today. 784-456-5400. Local agents SwiftPack Interprime Cargo. Call 784-456-5400 to book your shipments today.
Boy, that's where you getting crushed, you know? Your brakes real good, boy.
Now brakes alone good enough. My tires good too.
Tires? Where you get them tires, boy?
Out by Caribbean Tire Plus, man. They out in Addersville. Can't miss it. Look for the orange container on them. Plenty parking space and open 7 days a week all thing, man. Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And on Sundays, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Call them today. Caribbean Tire Plus, 784-432-4786 or email ctiresplus@gmail.com.
Lanes is your Vincentian family store. We give you quality service and you save more. We add value to your household, that's for sure. At Lanes, our customers always come first. For your family needs, come on in. Construction, household, and clothing. Our friendly staff is ready to help. Get more and save more. Remember, at Lanes, our customers come first. We thank you for making Lanes your family store for value. Lanes, your family store for value.
WEFM, the new fresh sound.
Rise and shine. Let's get ready to take on the day. Activated Mornings on WEFM 99.9 is on now.
And the time is now 8:56 here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we're back with Activated Mornings this morning. We have roughly 3 minutes left in this segment, but I just want to briefly touch on the government seems to have had issues with the 2023 census, and the Finance Minister Camilo Gonzalez, he expressed disappointment in the slow progress of the census data collection. And I was also looking at the roundtable talk on Visitry, where members from the census department expressed problems that they faced during the census and why it is that they were not able to receive accurate readings. They spoke about training, having to retrain a lot of the persons going out and taking the censuses. Minister Gonzalez spoke about losing persons going out and doing the censuses to better paying jobs. And then there is the time of it all, and there's also persons reluctant in giving information. And I just want to say it's very important to assist the census workers. The census assists the government in knowing what exactly they need to do in assisting families or persons with a lower income. The census has a lot of different benefits that I won't be able to list in the short period of time we have left. But I do hope that in the future, when the census is conducted, that more persons will be willing to share the information when they are questioned by the census officers. Roleza?
All right. I know that we touched on it before, but I think that people need to realize how important the census is, right? It's really one of the tools that's used to understand or to get an idea of where the country is, right? Not just in terms of the population size, in terms of, let's say, the male to female ratio. It also looks at issues for social development. Let's say a community has a population or it has been recently populated based on the last census, what social infrastructures can be put in place within, let's say, within that community. So there's a myriad of reasons for conducting the census. One of the things that I would say, though, Ari, and I guess I'm not surprised at persons' hesitancy in giving information is that, to be honest, there hasn't been a lot of information out there with regards to the census in terms of the value of the census, the importance of the census. Can people trust the enumerators with the information that they're being given? I don't think that, at least in terms of the forms that I'm seeing, and to be honest, I read the newspapers, I'm on social media, well, mostly Facebook, etc., and I'm not seeing information out there in terms of saying that the census is still being conducted, because I actually thought that it had finished already. So you have to develop that level of trust, because you can understand why it is that persons may be hesitant in terms of giving out their personal information. One of the things that I want to probably say here is that I have been interviewed in terms of the census, and for persons who are coming around, there are questions. If you choose not to answer, you can decline answering. But if nothing else, at least to be able to say the head count within a household, etc., that information can be given out. But I think the census persons themselves need to do a bit more job, a better job in terms of letting persons know the reason behind the census, or the reasons behind the census, the importance of the census, what information is supposed to be gathered, and the trust factor that is there, right? So yeah, maybe it's a matter of lack of funding. Who knows? Because advertising isn't necessarily cheap, but I mean, there are ways that you can get around the dissemination of information to the public. So they probably just need to be a bit more creative.
All right, and with that, the time is now 9:01 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and it is time for your ECCB currency exchange rates, brought to you by Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.